And we have actually one more event to speak to people and to build relationships. So this is the practical part. We have had at least 3 times today, and we are having the longest part after the keynote. And as every practice actually needs also some theoretical input, we have the final keynote today about creating quality relationships. So Tom, please come to the stage.
Hello.
Nice to see you here. I see that this is developing not only relationships, but quality relationships.
Correct. That's what I hope I'll...
So if you name 3 things, what makes a relationship quality relationship?
Oh, I'm going to talk all about that.
Really?
Yeah. I will give you, well, trust is a big part about it. I'll even give you a mathematical formula for people who like math and explain how to build it. Yeah, so it'll be good.
Absolutely, and again, expectations are high. So, yeah, and from the background, you are from Poland, right?
No, I am from Austin, Texas, the great state of Texas. But I now live in London, England. My wife and our kids moved there about 5 years ago because we wanted our kids to be global citizens. So, but I have a Polish last name.
Yeah, precisely. This is actually why I'm asking. So it's one of my favorite surnames. How to pronounce it?
Well, I'm going to try to make this interactive. And so I know there's some Polish people here. Who's Polish?
No, I'm not Polish, but I know how it's pronounced.
Oh, really? Okay. How do you pronounce it?
Chmielewski.
Right. So say it out.
Chmielewski.
Exactly. But how do I pronounce it? Chmielewski. Right? So my great-grandfather immigrated from Elk, Poland in 1902 to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And somewhere along the line, it went from Chmielewski to Chmielewski. And so we're going to log that as the first localization bug of my presentation, put it in Jira, tag it L10N, and it's just how it is. So, but because you have engaged, I'm giving you this book and €25 value. I'll explain why it's useful. And I have all these to give away too, as well. And I have a bet, if you can make me cry, you get 2 books. So anyway, so basically I run strategic relationships at Teslio. Teslio is an Estonian company, as probably most of you know. Rudolph asked me to give this talk. He said, can you talk about developing meaningful relationships? I thought it'd be a better title if I call it quality relationships. And I said, why me? He goes, because I've been watching you do this for 2 years and it comes really naturally to you. And I said, oh, okay, well, why not? But sure, it sounds like fun. So I spent the last 6 or 8 weeks thinking about what to tell you. And I have no academic, I'm not a sociologist, I don't have any knowledge about this. I really just talked to some friends who started as business contacts and are now very meaningful friendships. And I sort of asked them their advice, and I did my own thinking, and I'm going to decompile my best practices, if you will, and sort of share them with you, and hopefully it's helpful. And we can, and if you ask some questions, I'll give you a book. So, the number one thing, my first initial thought was vulnerability. I said the key to developing meaningful relationships is to be willing to put some vulnerability on the table. And I do this, it's sort of come naturally to me. As an example, I have this reputation within Teslio of being somebody who cries very easily. I'll tear up on calls in front of customers, and people would think, what the hell, what's going on with it? If I was talking about Oksana and what a great job she did, and I might get emotional about it, and I'll take out I'm like, and the customer's like, is he crying? Like, what's it? I'm like, yeah, I realize that's just who I am. If I walk today into a wedding in Tallinn, 2 people I wouldn't know, I'd be bawling. Like, I'm just so happy for them that they got married. And so most people would say, they would misperceive this as a weakness, whereas I believe putting vulnerability on the table takes courage. It's actually a sign of confidence. And what I think is if you do it, you create some space for the other person to lean in. And I'll give you an example. Teslio's founder, Crystal Krustek, who's awesome. He's here. I was here a year ago for our Lion Fest all hands company meeting, and we had a what do you call it? Like a talent show. So Oksana in the red played the ukulele, and so as she mentioned, and so Crystal had been sharing that she'd been practicing the piano. Now my kids play the piano. It's really hard to learn the piano when you're an adult. And so she got up there and she started playing and she messed up and she's like, oh my gosh, and I'm just learning and sorry. And I just thought, okay, here we all were, and she gave us the space to also be vulnerable at our company and be genuine and authentic, because here she was not trying to be perfect at the piano, but just saying, hey, look, I'm learning, and here I was. So I think it's leaders who do it can endear you and create great cultures. And so what I'm trying to say is, if you have the courage to put some vulnerability out there, people will see you as genuine and they'll see you as authentic, and that gives them space to say, hey, I'm not perfect either. I can be genuine and authentic in front of Tom, in front of yourself, and it creates space where a relationship can nurture. So one of the 3 people I talked to leading up to this event is a guy named Jake. So I met Jake in a call center in rural Tennessee. I was at a startup doing smart home, and we were selling to Comcast, which is like the biggest broadband provider in America. And they were rolling it out, and Jake was a consultant helping them roll it out in the call center. And I meet Jake, and I go, this guy's great. I got to hire him. So eventually I convinced him to move to Austin, Texas and join my team. And back in the day when everybody worked in offices, my team, the 3 of us sat in the same office. So Jake sat a meter away from me. And, over time, he meets this girl, Stacy, and we start, we're tracking his development, his relationship, and he tells us he's taking Stacy to Paris this weekend. He's going to propose to her. I'm like, oh, that's exciting. So I go home and tell my wife Eliza, hey, Jake's going to get engaged this weekend. And my daughter goes, do you think you'll be invited to the wedding? I said, I don't know. I mean, we're business. We have a friendship through business, and possibly, but weddings, honey, they're hard. A lot of people get invited, and we're business colleague. I don't know. I probably not. I'm not going to assume it. It'd be nice. And so Jake comes home from Paris, and he sits with me. We're like, how was it? It was great. He goes, Stacy and I have a favor to ask you. I'm like, what's that? He goes, we want you to officiate our wedding. And I'm like, okay, Jake, I cry at weddings. There's no way I could stand up there and officiate your wedding. I'll be a disaster. And he's like, no, you'll be great at it. And okay, so I told my wife that night. She just laughed. She's British, stiff upper lip. She's like, you'll be a mess. Are you kidding me? Does he have any idea how bad, you're no. She's like, you should say no. So I kept trying to say no, and he refused to take no. So I did. If you ever get the opportunity to officiate any sort of wedding, I highly recommend it. It's the most amazing experience. And so I did it. I didn't cry, and I did well, everybody tells me. So I thought about this, and I said, I messaged Jake, and I said, Jake, okay, I met you in a call center. A few years later, you asked me to officiate your wedding. I would call that a meaningful, quality relationship. How did we do it? And what does he write me? He said, number 1 for me is willingness to receive and exhibit vulnerability. At the end of the day, everyone has things they're insecure about in my marriage, friendships, etc. When I can either hear or be heard regarding these emotions and weaknesses, it unlocks the type of deep and empathic bonding that exemplifies meaningfulness. So it's funny to me that these 2 things came together. So I really believe it's counterintuitive and it's not weakness. Put some vulnerability out there. So then back in 2008, I started at this smart home startup. And my boss, CEO, said, there's this guy, Vince. He's at this pretty big company, a different company in America. And he's chosen to go with a competitor. But you need to call him up and convince him to go with us. I'm like, okay. So I call up Vince, and I say, hey, I'm Tom. I'm at this company. And my boss told me to call you. And he was very professional. but in a polite, and I'll say here, in sort of a very clear and sort of fairly icy way, said, don't call me, I'll call you, right? Like, I've made my decision, I don't need to talk to you. Well, fast forward during this sort of 6-week period between Rudolph, asking me and now, Vince reaches out to me, says, I'm coming to London with my daughter. I'd love to meet up with you, have dinner. And so, over the time, we became good friends. And so I sit down and I say, Vince, I'm giving this talk. And how do we go from don't call me, I call you, to you're spending time on your holiday with me years later? So I would call that, again, a meaningful relationship. And he gave me some really good insights I wanted to share with you, because he's not like me. He's an engineer. He's sort of introverted. And so I thought, okay, some people in the room may be like that. So maybe his thoughts would resonate with you. And what he said, he had 3 ideas. And he said, first, you have to believe that between any 2 people, there is a point of connection. And he said he didn't used to believe that. Now, I innately believe that. It just comes naturally to me. And I'm always looking for it. He says, you got to probe for it and find it. And once you find it, you can have a friendship that's outside of your business relationship. And so, but he said prior to that, thinking that, he had this sort of connection or this belief that they're not interested in me. And if is anybody guilty of that? Do you ever think, I never have that problem, but does anybody, if you think, thank you. So if you think they're not interested in you, it's hard to develop a meaningful relationship. But if you truly believe in this Venn diagram that any 2 people in the world, there will be some point of connection, you just got to find it, then have fun trying to find it. And then you can develop a real friendship, which is what happened with Vince and I. His second insight was somebody has to initiate the relationship, so why not it be you? He thought it doesn't matter in the end who started it, and he was always reluctant to try to start the friendship. But he realized as he got sort of more mature in his relationships that there's value in just having the guts to start the relationship. And third, and this was really insightful, he said, you have to value your relationships as much as you do your work product. Vince is an engineer. He said he was trained in university to come up with the answer. Anybody, he's like, come up with the answer, put a box around it and say, I got the answer, now give me the next problem. Is there anybody like that here? A few people, I'm seeing lots of hands, okay. So he said, he got into his job and he's like, I'm just, I like to say we're human beings, not human doings, right? But we can become human doings. I got to do this and I do this and I do that. And he valued his deliverables and his work product so much that he thought investing in relationships detracted from his deliverables. So does anybody have that challenge as well? A few people, right? So his advice, which I thought was good, is that you need to value them equally. And he told me a story of how the CEO of this company, it was a big company, said, wow, Vince, I'm so amazed. I'm fascinated how you launched these new businesses. What he was launching was a new smart home business. And I'd love to just learn from you. This is the CEO, how you do it for our company. Maybe you can reach out to my exec admin and schedule a time. I'd love to hear from you. And Vince is like, sure. And he's like, you know what? I never did it. I didn't reach out. My CEO invited me at this big company. He's like, because I thought it would take away. I was so heads down doing my job. I didn't think that taking away time from my deliverables would be worthwhile. And so his third advice is you need to be meaningful, carve out time to value your relationships as much as you do deliverables. So there's that one. Don't be afraid. Somebody's got to initiate it. So you might as well be the first. And you really have to fundamentally believe that between you and anyone on this planet, there is some common ground that you can find your relationship. Has anybody read this book, Getting to Yes? No. A couple people. Okay. This is a great book on negotiations. It's decades old. I was originally introduced to it when I was a tester doing billing systems at phone companies. I think I was in Dusseldorf doing a billing system for Vodafone Date2. And there was a workshop, which I now do at Tesla once a quarter. It was a very similar idea. teaching this book. And there's about a half dozen points in here about negotiation that I would recommend. But the one that I think applies to developing meaningful relationships is to take the time to think about in advance what your interests are with regards to a negotiation, or I would say any sort of interaction or relationship, and what their interests are. And so I'll give you an example. I think as I was thinking about this, it's a very practical approach on how to develop a meaningful relationship. So when I teach the negotiations class, one of the takeaways is just take the 10 minutes and write it down. So let's say you're head of quality at some company and there's a new head of product who comes in. And you think, back to Vince's point, I'm gonna take the initiative and I'm gonna reach out to her and say, hey, if you work in the same office, do you wanna have lunch or coffee? Or if you're virtual, like, can we have a virtual coffee? I love having virtual coffees with people. Like just open, like just get to know each other. So in preparation for that virtual or real coffee, take the 10 minutes to think about, research and think about what might be her interests and what might be my interests. So just hypothetically speaking, it's so easy now. You could go on LinkedIn and you might see, oh, she's written about how she was very proud about getting her prior company on their DevOps journey. So you're like, oh, okay, she's interested in DevOps. Maybe she posted about accessibility in products. And then you might see that she lives in a place that you've traveled to or went to a university you're familiar with, or some sort of personal connection. And then you can deduce, like, well, the prior head of product got let go because he couldn't speed up our innovation cycle. So I can deduce that her boss is probably putting pressure on her during the recruiting, saying, I really want you, one of your objectives needs to be to speed up our innovation cycle. And you might have ideas about that as a head of quality, and you have a shared interest in delivering great app experiences to them. And so now you've come into the meeting with some appreciation for the context within which she's operating, both as a business and personally, and you might have identified some points where your two circles overlap, maybe some point to break the ice, if you will. So really take that time, just as you would in a negotiation, before walking into a meeting to do that. And then you also need to be sort of extemporaneous or be able to improvise. So this just happened to me the other day, and I had to laugh. I signed up a new customer, a big strategic, big news company, and it's an important relationship, and we were having our first call with the new principal test lead for it, and so it was just a get to know you call, and so it was right after lunch, so I work from home, and so I had just made lunch, and I had left my apron on. I hadn't really thought about it, and I can see in the Zoom my apron, and I go, oh, I'm so sorry. I left my Star Wars apron on. I hold up and I have Star Wars. I'm like a big Star Wars geek. And he reaches off frame. He's like, no way, this is my TIE Fighter lamp, right? And now all of a sudden we're totally geeking out on Star Wars for the first 5 minutes of this call. But now, to Vince's point, we have a connection point. And I start telling him it's around May 4th, so may the 4th be with you, right? So it's Star Wars. So I tell him the story how when my wife was in Austin, she met this other mother when my daughter was little, and that mother happened to be Mark Hamill's niece. And so Mark Hamill, i.e. Luke Skywalker, right? Hands down, gives her daughter a gift. And then she hands it down because she grew out of it, Mark Hamill's niece, hands it down to my wife for our daughter. And I'm like, oh my God, this is from Luke Skywalker. My daughter's wearing this gift. And my daughter's now a Star Wars fan, and she's all excited. And then my wife, who's not a Star Wars fan, gave it away, to the charity shop, right? And so my daughter's now that she's appreciated, it's Mom, I can't believe you gave away my baby gift. I was gonna give it to my daughter. My daughter's 12 years old, right? So she's I was gonna give this to my daughter when I'm like, okay, so I'm telling this whole story, and and needless to say, we have a bond now, even though we've only met virtually. So I wouldn't have known he was a Star Wars fan, but I was willing to put some vulnerability on this and say, hey, look, I'm sorry, I'm wearing my Star Wars apron. And that started a connection. So that's important. the point is that if you're being genuine, people will respond, right? So the question is, how do you be genuine? And so I think one of the ways to be genuine is to know yourself, which is why I gave, what's my new friend's name?
My name is Yevgen.
What?
Yevgen.
Yevgen. Sorry, I was like, okay, Tom is easy. That's why, I can't pronounce any names. So, Yevgen. So I gave you this book, and this is why I'm going to tell you why it's valuable. And if you ask a good question at the end, I have more of these to give away. So, has anybody ever done this book, taken this test? Oh, a few people. Okay, right. So you know what your strengths are. Okay, so you're going to get this. So this book. So what happened was this guy Don Clifton. He was a psychologist after World War II, so this goes back decades. He sort of came up with this idea of boiling down everybody into, there's 34 strengths. Now, whether they're 44 or 24 doesn't really matter. He sort of came up with this concept of 34 strengths. And the premise of the book is, like when I started, when I came back from high school growing up in Houston, Texas, I bring my report card and my parents would say, why'd you get a B- in Latin 2, ignoring the fact I got an A+ in history, right? And they're like, well, the teacher stinks and I hate the subject. And then they didn't care, right? They're like, so does anybody, I try not to do this with my kids, but it's human nature that you tend to focus on your weaknesses, right? Has anybody had this happen to them? Okay. So the whole premise of this book is actually focus on if you know your strengths and what comes naturally to you, you can focus on your strengths. And I think if you know your strengths, you can it's really easy to be genuine because you'll know who you are better. So I've given this book to lots of people. Originally got the book when I was at Rackspace. They were a strengths-based organization, so the chairman there, everybody took the test. And basically what happens is don't buy the book used is my first tip. So because at the back of the book, there's a little single-use code. So, you rip it open, you go on to the website, you enter it, you take a 77-question quiz at 20 seconds per question. So 25 minutes later, they spit out a report. So this is where Gallup comes in. So this guy, Gallup is the organization that does all the polling for politics and the presidential elections and all that. So they understand how to ask questions and polling. And so they stack rank your 34 strengths and they spit out a report with your top 5, right? So it'll look something like this. These are my top 5 strengths. And at Rackspace, everybody had these in their cubicles. Even when I went to my kids' kindergarten class, the 2 kindergarten teachers had their strengths up outside their office, or their classrooms. And of course, their strengths were completely different. In fact, it's what you'd want, they're way at the bottom of my strengths, but they're like what you'd want in a kindergarten teacher, like touchy-feely and all really good with feelings and all these great things. So these are mine. And what's interesting is once you get the test and all of a sudden you have this epiphany, you're like, that's why I got an A+ in history. Context is one of my top 5 strengths. I studied history in university. I was drawn to it because that people exceptionally talented in the context theme enjoy thinking about the past. They understand the present by researching its history. This came so naturally to me. I had no idea. This is why I loved it. It also means, so you don't have to read the whole book is the beauty. Don't even bother. Take the test. And then you just read the 4 to 5 pages of the 5 strengths. So you just read the 20 pages and you really walk away an hour later going, I really have a really good idea of who I am. And now I understand some of the decisions I've made in my life. And you should then have even more confidence to put some vulnerability on the table, for my first slide, to be genuine, to start building trust. And as an example, context, I love doing postmortems. There are probably a lot of people in this room who hate doing postmortems. Are you one of those? Okay, right? If you knew that I was on your team and I have this, and this is my strength, you're like, give me the postmortem. I love dying. I love to know what we did wrong, right? So you'll also see on number 2 up here is woo. That explains why Rudolph said, I've watched you and this comes naturally to you. This is my number 2 strength. And it basically says, I love winning people over. So this whole Vince saying, I didn't think they had any interest to me. I'm like, what? Like that just blew my mind. How could you think that? That's not how people who have woo in their top 5 strengths think. And so I try to deconstruct this. So my gift to you is self-awareness. I would encourage you to go buy this book and then take that self-awareness and be vulnerable, be confident, be genuine. Also, I would advise against it, but they figured out you can pay 60 pounds and you can get the whole stack rank of your 34, right? Which of course is against the whole premise, which I did. And you're like, what's my 34th strength, which is really your number one weakness? And mine was spontaneity. So I keep telling my wife's like, I'm like, yeah, honey, I'm planning to be spontaneous next week. So I just can't be very spontaneous. But that's also, there's some power in knowing that too. Okay, I promised some math. And since I imagine there are a few engineers here. So this, I'm afraid to get feedback when I walk over here, but I don't want to ignore this part of the room. So this is actually from David Meister's Trusted Advisor book, which I want to give him all credit because it's his idea. And I haven't read that book because Bill Carruthers, who I was at a keynote like this, he explained it to me. He said, you don't really need to read the book. I've just explained it to you. But go buy the book if you want and read it. But what Bill Carruthers was, he was hired in, he was sort of a big senior consultant, British guy. He's now like OBE, in the UK. He was brought in by the British government to be chief commercial officer, which means he was in charge of all the purchasing and procurement. So he was saying, needless to say, the UK government spends a lot of money. I know Martin was talking about it this morning in procurement. You can imagine how much money the whole UK government spends. And so a lot of people want to have a relationship with Bill. And he explained to us, relationships are built on trust. In fact, Martin, in this morning's keynote, I don't know if you're here, Martin, he talked about that. And that's part of what IEEE brings to the standards. And so here's the formula for trust. So R stands for reliability. So you need to do what you say you're going to do, and you need to do it promptly. So as a tip, for example, whenever I have a meeting with a new person at the company, or particularly like a prospective customer, I put a half hour in my calendar, because what I was finding is people were booking meetings they're filling up my calendar. And I said, I'll do this after the meeting. And my day would fill up, and then it would go to the next day. And then I'm like, I don't have time. And then it's 3 days later, and instead of building trust, I was eroding trust because I wasn't being reliable. So now a trick I encourage I put a half hour follow-ups from meeting. And it's, if somebody does, like my boss puts a meeting there, I move it later in that day. So I'm following up from a meeting that day. So I'm reliable, and you're prompt in your reliability. And I think we all know that. You can sort of picture, okay, if somebody says they're going to do something, they don't do it, they're not building trust with me. Conversely, if they're always reliable, yes, I start to trust them. C stands for competence. So this is that you know something that's relevant and useful to me. So in my example with the head of quality and the head of product, what you bring to the table is you understand quality, you have some competence in different, about test automation or shift left or shift right, or, Ron's talk about, the DevOps cycle, or Zhao's talk about observability. Like you're here today, you're picking up competence, and you're willing to share it with them. So if they see that you're competent and that's relevant to you, that builds trust. And I stands for intimacy, which is that, I understand and care about your business and you as an individual. So both of those, the business and the individual. And this requires, Bill said, preparation, which goes back to my point about getting to yes earlier, like taking the few minutes to think through their interests and your interests. What's the business context they're operating in? like I said, she was, the prior head of product was fired for not speeding up the innovation cycle. We were being attacked by, challenger banks, and we need to do it, whatever it is. So you understand the context, you understand them, you've prepared, and you come to the meeting seeking to understand. So if you do those three things, and everybody sort of makes sense, reliability, competence, and intimacy, and you prepare and you respond quickly, you will build trust. So what's the S? S is up there all by itself, and it's in the denominator because all of the above is divided by self-interest. If you come across as selfish, and we can all picture this, you erode trust. And so you have to, of course, when you reach out to the head of product and you say, I'd like to meet you, she knows you're trying to develop a relationship and you have your own objectives. You want to develop quality product. Maybe you want to advance your career. So people don't think that you're completely altruistic, but it has to be done without self-interest. And the example Bill gave, again, remember he was head of procurement. He's like, when the people would call me up at the end of the quarter and say, I'll offer you a 10% discount if you sign today. He's like, that just destroyed my trust. That is 100% selfish. And so versus, he said, if they call me up and say, would you like to, he said he'd do lots of breakfasts. He's like, would you like to, have a breakfast? Just get to, no agenda, just get to know each other, maybe demonstrate some of your competence, some of your intimacy, just sort of say, what are you doing, this is what I'm doing, with no agenda. And he said that builds trust. And then I believe, as we say in Texas, the four most powerful words are, I need your help. So when you have trust and you ask for help, they'll actually be there for you. They'll be willing to do that. Because you may say, okay, now I don't need the deal at the end of the year, but it's stuck in approvals. Can I ask you to do me a favor to do this? Or, I need you to override, some sort of product process or something like that. So this makes sense. Good formula. I like it. All right. So my final tip, then we'll go to questions, is you need to invest time to send notes to people when you think about them. Preferably handwritten notes. And I'm going to say, I don't think that social media or likes count. I think those are sort of cop-outs. So this is a bit of a lost art, and I think some people roll their eyes at it, but I'm going to tell you it really does work. This was actually something my father taught me. He had a friend, Mr. Padden, this was before the internet or cell phones or anything, who he said, whenever you think of somebody, take out a note, jot a note and say, I was thinking of you. And that develops relationships with them. And it'll also it builds a genuine connection. It builds trust, which underpins everything. And it also develops a quality relationship. So as I was preparing about this, I was thinking, this was about 3 Saturdays ago. This is how my Saturday morning went. And I thought, okay, I'm going to share this as a practical tip so people understand. So I wake up, I get my tea, sit down, I start scrolling through my email. I get this sort of Londonist list of, every things going on in London because I think it's one of the world's greatest cities and there's always things going on. And it says top 20 pubs in London. So I'm scrolling through. I'm like, wow, number 3, that's where John, my old boss from Rackspace, and I, we went there to the Blackfriars pub. It's a great pub, but it's all pre-COVID. And so a little bit of crawl, walk, run. I agree it's a cop-out, but most people just stop there and say, oh, I went to that pub with John. I forwarded the email to John and say, hey, John, look at this. Number 3 is the Blackfriars pub where we went. I remember that fondly. That was a really fun pub. Hope you and Marley are doing well. Next day he responds saying, Tom, this is back to Bill's just breakfast. I was just thinking about him. That's it. He's like, I remember that so much. That was really fun. In fact, Marley and I are coming to London this summer. Would love to get together with you. Just, if you're going to have a meaningful relationship over years with somebody, you have to, when you're thinking about them, Mr. Padden's rule, write them a little note. So that's a bit of a cop-out because it's an email, right? So that's the crawl. And then I'm going to teach you the walk-run story. So the night before, Friday night, this was Saturday, I had gone out with my friend Oleg, who's Ukrainian, lived in London for a long time. And 20 years ago, we used to go out drinking with a friend, Chad, who now lives in Wisconsin, is married with kids. And so Oleg and I are going out, and so we do the easy thing. We take a selfie, send Chad a text, which is better than something, and say, hey, wish you were with us. And he replies, oh, that's great. But then at the end of the night, the bill comes, and you've seen this, like hotels and restaurants. There's a postcard in the blank postcard. I'm like, Oleg, this is Mr. Patton's rule. We've been talking about Chad all night. Let's write him a postcard. So we and we had so much fun. We're like this, and we Oleg sort of dictates, and I write it down. So Saturday, I write Chad's address. I put a stamp on it. Put it in the mail later. So Chad, what do you think happens a week later? Chad gets his postcard. He's like, wow, like it makes his day. He's like, somebody took the time to write a postcard to me, like Oleg and Tom, even though I already knew they were getting together because I got the text, and they wrote this funny postcard, and he's like, this is awesome, really made my day, put a smile on my face. And so I thought about, so Chad was the third person. I had Jake, and then Vince, and then I had Chad, and I said, Chad, we met in a business relationship. He was a prospective customer, he became a customer. He then asked me to be his best man in his wedding. I would call that a meaningful relationship that started in a business setting. I am godfather to one of his twin girls. I said, Chad, like how did we go from meeting each other to ultimately, I'm best friend, and he's a very close friend. And he said, this is what he wrote. He said, reflecting on it a bit, I think what you did so well is build high trust. There's a formula. If that's your thing. So we also had some fun, and we identified some common bonds that we shared as our ties to Wisconsin and being expats in London. That goes back to the Venn diagram. You find the common bonds. Once you have that starting point, you can build a friendship outside of the business relationship that we were doing. So the third thing I did that Saturday, and then we'll wrap up here, is so I was at a conference called the Sports OTT conference. It's like over the top streaming. It was in Madrid in November. And at the end, just like after, as soon as I'm done and you're like, come on, enough with your stories, let's go. So, we went to the bar and I meet two Brits and they were starting, I'm trying to find a common point. Like, where are you from? Oh, you're from Wimbledon, I'm from Wimbledon. And it turns out this guy Stuart and I, like we're both season ticket holders to Fulham Football Club, which, go Fulham. And so in the Premier League, and so we have a connection, and he's like head of technology at a sports streaming service. And so, eventually we connect over this back and forth as the season goes on. And I say, I'd love to get your advice on Teslio, because we have a lot of sports streaming service, the NBA and Major League Soccer and Manchester United. And he goes, oh, let's come to the office. I'll take you. So I said, I'll take him to lunch. So we go, we're there. I explain Tesla. He goes, this is really interesting innovation that Crystal came up with in Estonia. Like I can see 3 people in my ecosystem that would benefit from meeting you, learning about Tesla. It's like, I go, great. I mean, this is what I get paid to do. So I say, I get back home. I'll send you 3 emails that you can forward. I'll make it super easy for you. Now, back to the trust equation, reliability. I did it that afternoon. I didn't do it 3 days later. I made the time. I was in my calendar, and I fired, here are the 3 messages, fired a 1, 2, and 3. Thanks so much. Now, he's a busy guy. He didn't get around to firing off those emails. Fine, I'm not going to pester him. But we're still talking about Fulham as the season goes on, like, the disaster, 3 red cards in the Manchester United game, etc. And then he remembers, like, I owe Tom that. So he fires off 2 of the 3 emails. I think he had maybe just met with him. And so earlier that week, this was on Saturday, I had calls with one and a meeting with the other. And they both went really well. One's like, wow, this is great. Super innovation. I can see how we'll use you in the future at this point. And the other one's like, I actually want to scope a proposal from you guys. It actually led to an interesting, and I had been trying to talk to them for months, but it took Stuart putting his reputation on the line for me to get the meeting. So I took out my stationery, and I timed it because I thought, okay, I'm going to talk about this. And that Saturday, I wrote Stuart a thank you card. I said, Stuart, thank you so much for introducing me to Joe and Bill, or whatever their names were, right? It really means a lot to me that you put, your reputation on the line so that to introduce me. I want to let you know that I met with them this week. They both thought it was really fruitful. In fact, Bill or whatever is interested in a proposal, and I just really appreciate it. Thanks so much. Would happily, take the introduction to the third person when the timing's right. Beers at the next Fulham match are on me. Tom, now you have to have stamps to run this play, right? So I bet some people don't even have stamps. So you got to buy some stamps. And then I went to the mailbox and mailed Chad's postcard and this letter at the same time. What do you think happened? Well, I'll come back. So Tuesday, he gets the card and he drops me an email. He's like, Tom, I haven't gotten a handwritten note in years. He's like, it really means a lot to me that you took the time to write that. Now, I timed it. It took me 6 minutes and 58 seconds from the time I took out the card until I sealed it. So it's 7 minutes. Like that you took that time to write me, I'm glad the meetings went well. When the time's right, I'll introduce you to the third one. Look forward to seeing you, at the next Fulham match. Right? So what started as just a casual, so I challenge you guys, or literally an event like this at the drinks afterwards, led to, a friendship based on, we found the connection, I built some trust, I took time to write him a thank you card for doing it. And I would say now we have, in addition to a professional relationship, we have an acquaintance, meaningful quality relationship upon which we're building something. So the key here is that you have to have stationery. So does anybody here have stationery with your name on it, like a card? Oh, this is great. Your mothers are going to love me. This is the perfect gift to ask your mother to give you for your birthday or Christmas or, Hanukkah, or whatever yourself. They will love to give this because, my mother actually has a rule that if she gives you a gift, all her kids and all her grandkids, she doesn't receive a thank you note, she won't give them the next gift. And I've been trying to do this. I have a godson who's at MIT, brilliant kid. And I gave him like a nice high school graduation gift. He didn't write me a thank you card. And I said, Sam, this is the rule, right? He's my godson. I'm supposed to care, right? So I'm like, I took the time. Still, no thank you card. So then I broke my rule and I gave him another gift, which was cards with his name on it for Christmas. And a whole thing saying, this is the last gift I'm giving you unless you give me a thank you card. Still no thank you card. So I think it's generational. His mom's going to come visit us here shortly, so maybe I'll figure it out. But I would encourage you to get the cards, buy some stamps. So today before lunch, I walked to the Estonian post office and I bought a stamp. This is for Rudolph. So I'm going to cry now. No, so Rudolph is a great guy, and he asked me to do this, and I haven't written it yet, but I will. I'll take the 7 minutes, probably in the morning, because I'll be probably drunk tonight, and I will tell him how much I appreciate the opportunity to grow personally and professionally with this talk. I spoiled the surprise, but I imagine it will deepen our friendship. So there you get the whole Tom. So thank you very much. I have some books to give away if anybody has any questions. So who's up first?
Tom, will I get 2 books? You said like.
Yes, you do get 2 books.
No.
You do. You made me cry. I just thinking about you.
Hi, thanks.
Yes.
My name is Alexis. Thanks for the great talk. This was a really great one at the end of the day. Was there ever a younger version of Tom who was afraid to be vulnerable? And if it was so, what were the reasons behind that?
Yes. So, so Oksana, who is studying psychotherapy, and that's a great question. And here's your book. If you want the other one, you can have that one. You get to choose. The first people get to choose. Yes, so I've done a lot of, my mother was a psychiatric nurse, so every, dinner was like, how does that make you feel? Like group therapy. So I have a long answer to that, but I'll be short. My father, when I was 12, my dad got cancer, and I learned a lot from his dying about living. So he fought for about 17 years. In fact, I want to put this up here. I hope to connect with you LinkedIn. My number one LinkedIn post, 100,000 people, it went totally viral, was about this note that my father wrote me. It's back in April, you can go look it up, about attitude, because so there's a 12-year-old kid in me who was afraid of losing his dad, because I remember being in the living room, my mom's like, Dad's got cancer, they give him a year to live. He lived 17 years. Maybe that's the part of me that still like feels the emotion like come from behind. But it took me a while to realize like the 54-year-old Tom has to give the 12-year-old Tom a hug sometimes. Maybe that's what should have just happened a few minutes ago. But it took that confidence to be able to be vulnerable. But I would argue even like, I actually didn't think I would tear up on this talk, but just hearing like Rudolph and like it doesn't bother me anymore. Like, I guess, I had one test line he left who like afterwards, he's like, you're such a crybaby. I'm like, screw you, right? Like I just, it just doesn't bother me, right? My grandfather was this brush, like Polish painter in Milwaukee, and he used to cry. I just figure it's genetic. So I just embrace it. But sometimes the 24 or 54 or whatever year old you has to give, everybody has an unresolved childhood issue. You figure out what yours is. If you haven't, pay some therapists and you'll figure it out. But at some point you have to give the kid in you a hug and realize, okay, it's gonna be fine. I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah. Okay, who's next? I'm gonna look to the moderators there's one there, I think, yeah?
Yes, my name is Helena, but I have the surname also very difficult for pronunciation, like you. But I have a small question. Every time I want to ask you why, like in the 21st century, you didn't take like a thank you message, email, or maybe words. Maybe your godson did say your very special words and so on, but maybe he can try it or
so that's why I did say like the email about the pub and the crawl, walk, run strategy is, it's better do something than nothing. And I don't know, I assume 9 out of 10 people wouldn't even send that. Maybe they'd send the selfie to Chad saying, hey, Oleg and I are drinking, thinking of you. I think maybe they think, oh, I went to that pub with John, but they wouldn't take the extra, like an email. It's just an amount of friction, right? So to send the email takes a minute, right? And so we're so frictionless, and I think it's actually the ability to, I think the meaningfulness comes from the fact that they go, wow, he took the non-low friction approach. He took the extra time to actually write me a card. It's not saying I do it all the time, but like I will write, Rudolph a card because it means a lot to me that he asked me to do this, and I've enjoyed it, and hopefully it was good, but he didn't have to. So I could just send him a Slack and say thanks so much, but I think it'll be more meaningful if I write a little bit. So I would say crawl, walk, run, and or hold yourself to a higher standard and try it, and see what happens. But I would argue the countervailing, so like my godson, I try to tell him this, I even wrote it to him, like, look, he's brilliant. I mean, he's at MIT studying astrophysics. But he doesn't get this, right? And I try to tell him, Sam, at some point you're going to apply to graduate school, and you've been in a room with 200 students, and you're going to ask that professor to write you a recommendation and who do you think the professor is going to remember? The person who at the end of the semester took 7 minutes to write on the stationery I gave him, say, dear, Professor Diana, thank you so much for teaching me about astrophysics. I really learned a lot. I thought you were a great teacher, blah, blah, blah. Now, when you come back to her 3 years later and say, will you invest 30 minutes in me to write a recommendation to go to graduate school? She probably gets 20 of those requests a year. Who do you think she's going to do it? So I'm trying to teach him, but I think you just, some point you have to learn, right? So that would be how I answer it. I don't know if it helps. I think there's another, I'll look to, who's next? Yeah.
Yes, hello.
Oh wait, I owe you a book.
Yep.
Because I'm not taking these back, they were heavy. Which one do you want? I would say do the Strengths Finder, but this is great unless somebody, if I'm not selling that, this is a must read, but yes.
Yes, my name is Evgeny, thank you for your speech, it was amazing. So it will not be a question actually, but I have a proposal how to improve your formula. Because
to improve my what?
Formula.
Formula, oh
yeah.
Yes, okay, let's go back. Well, it's not my formula actually, it's David Meister's formula. Yes, how would you improve it? What's your variation?
Because of math things, we cannot divide by 0, and if your self-interested will be 0, so then the trust will be infinity.
Yeah, right, that's a good point. So actually, I like it, and I would say, to my point, there's always a little bit of selfishness. Right, like in my example, I said, you're reaching out to the head of product because you want to develop a relationship with her. You may be hoping that advance you. So it's just how self-interest.
So what do you think if you put the RC and I to the brackets and multiply both self-interested? It will be much better.
So remember I said I was a history major? So I stopped taking math after high school, so it sounds great. And I would encourage you, yes, maybe you could, go find. I mean, it's really probably for David Meister. Go find his class. I think it's actually brilliant, but I wouldn't know. It's beyond my level. But I'm gonna give you your Strengths Finder book as well, and you can see. What your strengths are. They don't have like math as a strength, but they have like futuristic and different things. That's good. Okay, a few more if we have time. Who's up next?
Hello.
Yes.
So about vulnerability. So I have a technique. Sometimes at work I say that, I'm feeling too blonde today. Can you explain me something? So it works. It works for the first time, maybe for the second as well. But as a woman in IT, how I can be vulnerable, but not sounding just stupid.
Right. So say that again. What did you? What's
I'm feeling blonde today.
Feeling
blonde.
Oh, blonde. Oh, like Legally Blonde, like the movie. I thought you were saying blunt. I'm like, like blonde. Oh, wow. Okay. Well. I don't know. I think I did think about this when I said vulnerability, because, in fact, I would love tips if anybody knows how not to tear up. But I remember I have a good friend in Austin, and she's EVP of engineering, and I have this no jerks policy. So I had a boss who sharpened his elbows when he went into the office. And he made her cry in front of a whole group. Now, it's one thing to be a guy, to be a crier, like to be a woman in tech and to be made cry, it was hard for her. She's obviously super capable. And so I thought about it. It's another case of maybe unfairness, but it's probably easier for me as a white middle-aged man to be vulnerable than a woman in tech. So I will admit that. I don't know what the best trick is. I'll leave that to you to discuss, but I admit it's like most things, women have to do it twice as well as men. It's harder, I think, in technology to be vulnerable as a woman. I will admit that. Any other? Who's up next? Did I give you a book? No, I didn't. Okay. I would actually say the good book for you would be Getting to Yes, because I think this will help you think through interests and how to, so if you can maybe hand that to her. You'll enjoy that, and if you've already read it, you can do some trades and swaps like soccer cards or something. Who's next?
Hello.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the formula, please?
No.
This kind of guy, yeah.
So the formula is the winning thing. Yeah. Remember, this is David Meister's IP. I don't want anybody to think this is not my IP. Yes.
Did it ever happen to you that you were thinking about someone? You write your awesome note. Yes, I'm thinking about you today. Thank you for blah, 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 blah. Then you send it. And before it reaches, a couple of days after that, something in the formula is wrong. and you think, oh, I shouldn't have written note now, you know?
You mean something changes where the note feels not
exactly.
genuine?
And putting the time variable, you know, because from you read it, since it gets...
No, because I'm generally just I'm investing, like I think, you said like you're putting a deposit in the emotional bank account. I forget who wrote that, right? You know, and then you sort of, like, with technology, when I started, I would say, look, something's going to go bump in the night in this partnership at some point, right? Like there'll be a bug or something. We all know it, right? So you're always just trying to build up trust and like deposits in the trust account, and then it will get drawn out at some point. So generally speaking, I mean, it's a good question, but I don't have a time variable. I just am continually, it just comes naturally to me now. So I'm just trying to share with you. I don't want to make it, you know, so tips that you can apply. I think if you do it genuinely, like I didn't write the note to Stuart because I thought, you know, I was like this formula. It was more that, like, I really appreciated, he didn't have to do that. And I wanted to show my appreciation, and my mother had taught me, and you know, my father taught me that this is how you do it.
Yeah, just be generous at that point. And
then let it go to the universe, and sometimes people may not write back, but you're not doing it for the write back, right? So I hope that answered. There's 2 more books you get to choose. And
the Clifton one, please.
The Clifton, all right, good. This one I've actually established is worth 25 euros. So maybe that's why everybody wants it. But do you mind handing that back to him? It's good. And then for those of you who got it, send me a LinkedIn and tell me what your strengths are. You know, I'd love to learn, you know, what you think, you know, what you thought of it. And one last question, one last book.
Yes,
I don't know what time it is.
That's me.
All right, yes. How can I help?
I'm
Yes.
Tina. First of all, I wanted to say that this was the best talk of the day. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I don't know about that. You're going to make me cry. I only have one book. I only have one book.
Yes.
I'm going to have to rip
Here
it in
comes
half
my
to
question.
give you like 2 books. Sorry, yeah.
I'm also a crybaby.
Oh, good.
But I'm a woman. So here's the question. How do people react to you when you start to cry? Because you're a man.
Yeah, I know.
And usually people do not cope with that well.
Yeah, and it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in a weird sort of way, right? Like, oh, I'm not going to cry, but then I did. So my mother explained it to me, maybe the psychiatric nurse, she's like, it's as if I'm standing with my back to the ocean, and like just a wave hits me, and I don't know it's coming. Right? We've all stood in and so I heard, like, if you press your tongue against the roof of your mouth, it can help, like, you know, prevent but I actually, in some ways, it can almost be worse because men are supposed to be tough, and especially if you're in England where it's like, you know, stiff upper lip. And I have had customers who don't know, but in the end, I think it just endears them, right? You know, an example I was giving, Teslio has this Ignite program, and I was mentoring a woman who had been through a bunch of abusive situations. I don't know all the details, but they asked me to be her mentor because to show that there are gentlemen in the world. And I was telling this, and just thinking of all the things she went through made me, it's just even now, I'm just like, gosh, she doesn't deserve that, right? And I was telling PayPal as my customer, I'm like, we'd love to have you involved in this program. And I just started crying. I couldn't get the words out because I just was thinking about like all she's been through, and she didn't deserve it. And so I don't know, like you tell me, like it's probably embarrassing. I don't know, like it could be worse as a man, but I just tell people, hey, that's how I am, and I have a handkerchief and I just do this and that's that, and screw them.
Yep.
Right? You know, if they don't like it, they don't. But they didn't. I think they did think it was awkward because it was more than just tearing up. Like I had to gather myself up because I was really hit me like a wave. And so maybe I don't know. Like I didn't expect this to be a talk about crying, and I didn't expect to cry twice. But here you are. I put my vulnerability out there at the beginning, and like so you were. Maybe that's like they were warned. right? So some way, like if you know it can happen, you can just sort of say, hey, look, just so you know, I have a reputation of being somebody who can tear up, and I just own it. You know, my grandfather. So I preempted, I guess, is the example. I don't know if that helped.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you. Here's the book. Thank you very much. You can come get this. Or maybe you can hand this to her. There you go. Thank you. Well, I'd love to talk to all of you at the dinner and drinks. I'll be there. And, thanks for making it so enjoyable. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Yeah.
Well, I always thought you would be a hugger, so...
I am a hugger. I didn't know. I didn't think Estonians hug, Texans hug. Yeah,
So always good to make an exception, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you so much for the speech.
Thank you.
It was definitely one of the most emotional ones I've heard here.
Oh, good. Well, testing and emotions can go together. Yes, thank you so much.
Got loads of emotions. We'll talk about that later.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Well, thank you.
So, this is Tom.
Thanks. Cheers.